Pedro Pascal is taking the world by storm.
I can bring you in warm. What town? Or I can bring you in cold.
And he's more than just a Hollywood star, he's everyone's favorite on-screen daddy figure and a beloved internet meme.
I am your cool slutty daddy.
But it hasn't always been this way. In fact, for most of his 30s, fame and success was nothing more than a distant pipe dream. From years of rejection to personal tragedy, Pedro Pascal's journey has been anything but easy. Today, he's one of the biggest actors in Hollywood and considered one of the most influential people in the world. This is the story of Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal was born in Santiago, Chile in 1975. He was born smack dab in the middle of a military dictatorship led by General Augusto Pinochet. Let's just say life in Chile back then wasn't exactly a playground. Imagine a place where freedom of speech was choked, the media heavily censored, and political opponents silenced, hunted down, and imprisoned. Well, Pascal's parents were in the middle of exactly that. His mum, a child psychologist, and his dad, a fertility doctor, weren't the types to just sit back and stay quiet. They were part of the resistance movement, the people fighting against the dictatorship, working in the shadows to speak up against the regime's brutality. Pascal's parents were listed as enemies of the state by the Pinochet regime, which meant their every move was closely watched and controlled. As you can imagine, this was a dangerous life. We're talking risking their own safety and by extension, the safety of their family. Not long after Pascal was born, things got a bit too hot. The regime eventually came looking for his father, and his parents were faced with a choice: stay and face serious consequences, or make a run for it. When Pedro Pascal was only 9 months old, his family packed up and fled to Denmark, before making their way to the United States and eventually settling in San Antonio, Texas. Life in Texas was a strange blend of freedom and challenges. His family didn't have much money, and they weren't exactly living the American dream. But Pedro Pascal had a way of escaping reality: movies and TV. He was obsessed. Growing up in the 80s meant access to the golden age of sci-fi and adventure films like Star Wars and Indiana Jones. Little did he know that one day he'd end up starring in one of those universes, but we'll get to that later. As he got older, Pedro Pascal's passion for films kept growing. He took up theater and drama classes, and his family backed him all the way, especially his mother. And by the time he was a teenager, he knew he wanted to be an actor. After high school, Pedro Pascal moved to New York to study at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. New York wasn't just a place to learn the craft of acting, it was also where Pascal started to find his people. He was surrounded by fellow dreamers, people who shared his passion, his obsession, and maybe his insecurities. Right after he graduated in 1997, he started hustling for work. His first role was on a TV show called Good vs. Evil in 1999, and in the same year, he also had a brief stint on the 4th season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Then, in 2000, when Pascal was 24 years old, he sadly lost his mother. Losing the most important person in your life, discovering that something like that is possible and that what you fear most in life can happen, is something that stays with you permanently and marks a before and after.
I remember it being an unbelievable thing to get through, to be honest with you. I just loved her so much.
As a tribute to her, he changed his professional last name from Balmaceda, his father's, to Pascal, his mother's. This was an incredibly difficult time. He was devastated by his mother's death, and he also had to face the uncertainty of his career at the same time. He landed small side roles in crime shows like Law & Order, NYPD Blue, and Without a Trace, but he found himself getting typecast as the Latino guy playing thugs or drug dealers. This went on for over a decade, and his career wasn't really going anywhere. But even though he wanted to, Pedro Pascal never gave up. I was getting my ass kicked. I died so many deaths. I guess this delusional self-determination and no real skill at anything else is what kept me going. Around this time, Pascal struggled to make ends meet. He took up jobs waiting tables and says he got fired from upwards of 20 restaurants. And his close friend Sarah Paulson would lend him money when he couldn't afford to feed himself. Now, Pedro Pascal had been close friends with Sarah Paulson ever since they crossed paths in New York as two young aspiring actors. Their friendship became a lifeline for Pascal through all the rejection and all the hardship. In 2017, Sarah Paulson said, "He has a rather righteous sense of self. When I look back at it now, I do know there was always this voice deep down inside him that said someday he was gonna do what he wanted to do in the manner in which he wanted to do it." Fast forward to 2014 and Sarah Paulson was already making waves in the industry. But Pedro Pascal was still hustling, still trying to find his big break. Endless auditions, most of which led to closed doors or background roles. Until one day, he asked Sarah Paulson to pass an audition tape to her friend Amanda Peet, the wife of Game of Thrones showrunner David Benioff. And this was the role that would change his life forever.
Yeah, over in
Oberyn motherfucking Martell, man. The Red Viper, what do you want? Changed my life.
Game of Thrones was quite literally the biggest show on TV at the time. Everyone was talking about it and it had a die-hard fan base. And so it was the perfect opportunity for Pedro Pascal to show the world what he was capable of.
Who gave you the order? Who gave you the order?
He landed the role of Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper of Dawn. And of course, he knocked this role out of the park. His charisma, his intensity, his ability to make Oberyn this larger-than-life figure in such a short span of screen time was remarkable. He instantly became a fan favorite, and even though his storyline was short-lived, Pedro Pascal left a mark, and Hollywood started paying attention. He even credits Game of Thrones as the role that changed his life, a breakthrough that finally gave him the opportunity to explore bigger and better roles. And it was right after Game of Thrones that he landed his first lead role, and that was of course in Narcos. Narcos is based on the true story of the rise of Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar. Pedro Pascal played DEA agent Javier Peña, one of the two main DEA agents tasked with bringing Escobar down. He portrayed him as gritty, complex, and someone with a strong sense of justice who was struggling with the moral ambiguity of the drug war.
Don't steal. Just do it.
Sometimes you gotta do bad things to catch bad people.
Narcos was a hit show that gave Pascal the momentum he needed at this point in his career, and this helped him land one of the most important projects of his career, The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian first premiered in 2019 to be the first live-action show in the Star Wars franchise. Disney took a big risk here, creating a Star Wars show centered on a mysterious bounty hunter who rarely takes off his helmet. As a huge Star Wars fan himself, getting cast in this role was a geek-out moment for Pedro Pascal, a literal dream come true. He brought so much depth to Mando, the lone wolf with a hidden heart. Somehow, even with the mask on, he still conveyed the qualities and the emotional arc that made Mando a character that everyone could root for, especially as he became the ultimate protector of Grogu, or as everyone calls him, Baby Yoda. Now, The Mandalorian exploded in popularity and grew a huge fan base, and it's almost all owed to Baby Yoda. This little guy quite literally took over the internet when the show came out, from endless memes on social media to news headlines to driving an incredibly successful launch for Disney+. And fans fell in love with Mando and Baby Yoda. They were the duo nobody knew they needed. The way precious Baby Yoda turned a cold and stoic bounty hunter into a tender father figure was, as many would call it, wholesome. This role not only brought Pedro Pascal much more recognition as he blew up on social media, but this is where he officially got Hollywood in a chokehold. Because now all of a sudden, every production in Hollywood wanted him to audition. When he became available after shooting the second season of The Mandalorian, he was getting offers for projects from almost every major streaming service. And out of all those offers, he chose to incarnate none other than Joel Miller in The Last of Us. The Last of Us was widely praised upon its release. Being based on a popular video game, critics and even fans were surprised by the emotional depth of the show, rarely seen in video game adaptations. Most video game adaptations up until then would pretty much just crash and burn in the transition to TV and film, but that wasn't the case here. Most fans of the game loved the show, and many critics even called it the best adaptation of a video game ever. I mean, it's not like the bar was set very high, but still. Pedro Pascal brought Joel to life with a mix of vulnerability and sheer grit that was both heart-wrenching and gripping. Joel is a haunted man, a hardened survivor carrying the weight of a post-apocalyptic zombie world on his shoulders. He's tasked with escorting the immune teenager Ellie across the country, who he forms an unlikely bond with, and yes, becomes like a father figure to her. And this role pretty much cemented him as the internet's favorite daddy.
For instance, what are you? Are you the daddy of the internet? What's internet daddy?
Me?
Yeah, you are.
In many ways, Pascal's experiences have shaped him into the star he is today. He's able to channel his heart-wrenching past into some of the most emotionally complex characters, and outside his roles, there's something so genuine about him that's rare in most celebrities, and his personality has won over millions of fans.
Hey, hello, I love you. I'm just gonna sit here and say I love you and say hi and slay. And yas.
And for someone who's literally dominating Hollywood, he's still grounded as ever. He's still the guy who remembers where he came from and the family that made him who he is today. While he's basically taken over TV at this point, Pedro Pascal isn't stopping there. From Wonder Woman in 1984 to Gladiator 2 to joining the MCU to play the lead role in Fantastic Four, Pascal's career has no signs of slowing down anytime soon. It's safe to say Pedro Pascal will hold on to his status as one of Hollywood's biggest stars for years to come, and he deserves all the credit for never giving up on his dreams.
What are you talking about?